Lo, in that little window niche, how statue-like I see thee stand, the folded scroll within thy hand, a Psyche from the regions which are Holy Land. Greetings, Poe fans. Welcome back to another episode. I am Carmen Bolden,
I am Jeannie Smith, and we
and we
are
are
the
the Potastic
Potastic Two.
2. Hey,
We're
Jeannie.
delayed because of the weather.
Yes,
We're on a weather delay. Whoop.
we are on a weather delay, and that's okay. And I'm going to
Mhm.
rhyme anyway.
Oh yeah. Oh Lord, let's not start it off. No.
I know it. I know it. All right. So, Jeannie, what are we going to
Mhm.
talk about this evening?
Well, in honor of Mother's Day that just passed, we thought we would discuss the three main mother figures of Poe's life. And
Yes.
even though one is, the giver of birth of life that he didn't really have a chance to learn. The other
Hmm.
two were more or less the love givers that he needed, even though some
Yes.
of them weren't allowed to give a lot, because unlike sometimes today people live longer. Back then they had too many diseases, and the women especially had to suffer through.
Right.
And but we're going to discuss that. And so we're going to start with the first one, which was, of course, his birth mother. And take it away, Carmen.
All right. So, his birth mother was Elizabeth Arnold,
Mm-hmm.
and she was born in London, England. So it's very kind of cool that he did get to live in England for about 5 years of his life when he was with the Allens, once
Mm-hmm.
she passed, and we'll get there in a moment. But she was born in 1787, and she basically was born into a family that her mother was also an actress,
Mm-hmm.
and this kind of like allowed her to see her mother perform, and her mother actually got her into acting at a very young age, which is really kind of interesting. So basically, once she was born, lived just a little while, not even 10 years, almost 10. They, at the age of 9, they came over to the United States in 1796. And she stayed in the United States continuously throughout the rest of her life, which was unfortunately very short lived.
Mm-hmm.
And so they ended up kind of landing in Boston, which kind of makes sense with it being, close to, the water.
Closer
And
to England than
yeah,
most other parts. So.
exactly. And so, but her mother basically got her into acting, like I said, just at a very young age. And this was around, looking at my notes, basically a few months after they got to Boston. She had her having, she went by Eliza. So she was born Elizabeth, but most people know her as Eliza Arnold, the actress. Her
Mm-hmm.
first stage of debut was in a play. It's called by David Garrick, and it was a farce, Miss in Her Teens.
Hmm.
And
That's
so,
interesting.
yeah, and so then Eliza's mother married a musician. His name was Charles Tubbs, and they moved to Charleston, South Carolina. So, what's really interesting too is that Poe was stationed in Fort Moultrie on, right outside of Charleston. So it just, there's some
Mm-hmm.
interesting little ties here. But basically, they joined an acting troupe called the Charleston Comedians and did performances there. And so she was very successful. Her mother died in 1798. And so Eliza continued to act with different groups and troops, acting troops and things.
Mm-hmm.
And so she ended up going to Richmond, to Baltimore, and Philadelphia, and acting and acting and acting. And She was very popular. She could sing, she could dance, she could do comics or comedies and dramatic performances. So she was very well versed and had lots of different characteristics to where she could do anything she wanted as an actress, which is really neat. And
Yes,
so,
and being that strong in that type of profession in those days, especially considering she was so popular, and she even played opposite many of the prominent actors of that time.
right, exactly. And so, in 1802, at the age of 15, she married a man named Charles Hopkins, who was also an actor. And
Mhm.
so she lived with him, and they acted together at the in Alexandria, Virginia, at the Alexandria Theater, and basically they worked together for a short time because their marriage was very short lived. I wrote
Mhm.
down the date, and I'm trying to find what date he died. He basically died 3 years into their marriage, and he got yellow fever. So she was an 18-year-old widow.
Sounds about right.
Yeah. And so
Especially yellow
then,
fever during that time was really, really on the rise.
oh, absolutely. I mean, there was what, yellow fever, tuberculosis or consumption,
Hmm.
and then what's the other one I'm thinking of that,
Cholera.
yes, cholera. Yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of the big three of the time, unfortunately.
Yep.
So then be, due to that, she was on her own, but she and Hopkins did not have children. And so in
Yeah.
1806, she married another actor by the name of David Poe.
However, David Poe Jr., who
Correct.
she married,
Yes.
was not currently an actor when they were
Mm-mm.
married. He was actually a law student.
Yes. And he abandoned that
Yes, yeah,
law
that
school.
avenue.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And from other things I've read, not necessarily the research that I did for our talk tonight, but he was not as popular or talented as she was. And so
yeah,
you
and
kind of
they fought a
wonder,
lot.
yeah, you kind of wonder if that played any part in why he left, when he did.
Well, and he could have gotten jealous
Yeah,
of
it's
her
possible.
and her popularity, and especially considering then they had started having children, and so she was not only being a mother, but she was still being an actress and still trying to be a wife, and
Yeah.
things like that kind of
Yeah, because
make it difficult.
they pretty much had three children within about 3 years' time.
Yeah, because William, that was the oldest, William
Yes.
Henry, right? William
Yes.
Henry.
Hmm.
He was only about a year or 2 years older than Edgar, and then
Yes.
Edgar was only what, maybe a year and a half older than his sister.
Yeah, roughly. Yeah. I mean, it was, they were very, very
Very
close in
quick.
age. Yeah. And he
Yeah,
abandoned them in 1810. And yeah, Edgar was one, and Eliza was actually pregnant with Rosalie. She was not even born yet when he left.
right. So she was left a a single mother and a mother to be. So
Yeah.
he was a real pain.
Exactly. But one of the things that I found was an article from the National Park Service that have some critiques about her acting ability that I wanted to read a couple because I thought it would just be kind of neat to hear about her because, we know she's an actress.
Hmm.
There are some places where it says she, performed in these things, but there's not a whole lot about her, which is very unfortunate that there's not more information. And
Yeah.
so I'm going to read two different little small reviews of her work. So this was for a performance. The title of the little review is called Mrs. Poe Has Hit the Happy Medium. And this was from her performance in plays called Pizarro and John Bull at Fontainebleau in Ramblers magazine and New York Theatrical Register, November 1810. This is what they said about her. In the afterpiece, Mrs. Poe was excellent. It is in this line of character she particular delights and to which she should bend her chief attention. It is difficult to be sprightly without being fantastic, and to act the hoyden without being gross and mawkish. Mrs. Poe has hit the happy medium and her cultivate it with assiduity. It is one of the most difficult and most important departments of female comedy. So I thought that was really cool.
Yeah. So I mean, it's very rare that you get like good critique, especially when it's written.
Right, right. And so that would have been November 1810. Let's see, because she died. She died.
She died in December of 1808.
Yeah, let's see. No, it was after that. It was 1811 because she could have
Oh
died
yeah,
in
sorry.
1808 because Edward was born in
Yeah, I
1809.
just realized that. I was trying to think about when Edgar was born and I forgot to add the because I know she died the month before his
Right,
third birthday. So
right.
I forgot to add in the extra ears.
Oh no, it's all good. It's all good. I just had to give you a hard time.
Yeah. Yeah, that'd be kind of like, she was dead when she gave birth to Edgar, and, she kept on living to give birth to Rosalie. So, hey,
Right.
she's a zombie. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, exactly. And so yes, December 8th, 1811. And so that was just 1 year before she died that, how
Mm-hmm.
well she was performing. And so this one was by the death of this lady. And this was news of Eliza Poe's death in the Richmond Enquirer, December 10th, 1811, Richmond, Virginia. So this is basically like a little obituary. Died on last Sunday morning, December 8th. Mrs. Poe, one of the actresses of the company at present, playing on the Richmond boards. By the death of this lady, the stage has been deprived of one of its chief ornaments. And to say the least of her, she was an interesting actress and never failed to catch the applause and command the admiration of the beholder. And I
Nice.
really liked the way they wrote that, kind of like in the eye of the beholder, the admiration of the beholder, and it kind of it really flows into like a metaphoric sense of when you do watch a play and how well someone acts it out, it is in the eye of the beholder of who is watching it.
Yes, the audience holds the key.
Yeah, exactly. And so I found all of that really interesting that did find some critiques about her work and that she was so talented, so diversely talented, because so many actors, I think now more than olden days, I guess you could say, to for
Mm-hmm.
lack of a better words, actors nowadays are so one
Dimensional.
yes, thank you for that
You're
word.
welcome.
Yes.
Yeah. There's no world round kind of actor as there was in the theater from those days
Yeah.
because they had to do it all. I mean,
Yeah.
there was no CGI, there was no major costume changes, there was no review, there was no recreate, touch up. Every single play that they did was a different play, even though they said the exact same things or they acted the exact same way. It was just the emotion because sometimes the actors would play off of the audience. Now, if they got an audience
Yes.
that was very low key, nothing, they would have to change up their attitudes in order to get that reaction.
Right. Yes. Mm-hmm.
And in today's society, even on Broadway, there is so much more that they do on Broadway with lights, with cameras, with, you know, swinging. They have actors swinging. Now, they did back in the old days too, but they didn't do a lot of that because it didn't
Mm-hmm.
have a lot of the same techniques.
Yeah.
But yeah, a live action audience is a whole different ball game from
Yeah.
something was watching on television. So, and that's one thing with Eliza. She had to adapt. She had to be that constantly, and I think that's part of the things that pushed her to her death. I mean, not
Yeah.
just tuberculosis, but it we all know that if you get drained, if you get tired, you're more susceptible to diseases. And the
Right.
woman was raising three kids and
By
having a
herself.
career.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
by herself and having a career, and as you said, as you just read, it was a very lucrative career and she was getting great reports.
Exactly. And I like the way you said that, Jeannie, that she had to adapt
Mhm,
because she probably never wanted to go without working. Because
mhm,
even when she and David Poe were together, I'm sure that, you know, because she was so well renowned and so beloved as an actress, that she was bringing in enough money to keep them afloat. And
mhm.
so she was going to take any kind of role she could and do the absolute best she could at it and
Yes, because
excel.
I mean, she knew that that was what put food on the table. That was
Right.
her livelihood. And it's not only that it's something that she loved to do, but it was her lifeline
Yeah,
for
exactly.
her and her kids. So,
Yeah.
I
And
mean,
the thing that I think is just so I don't even know the word, but the Edgar not remembering his mother, you know,
mhm.
that's the sad tragedy of it is that, you know,
He never had the opportunity to understand what his mother, who she really was, what
mhm,
she sacrificed, how she lived before she had children, much less while she was raising kids,
right.
because she left him and he had no way of finding out. And I mean,
Yeah.
think about it from nowadays. We have such the opportunity with social media and with cameras and with videos and recordings that it's very much an opportunistic time that we can take to relive those memories if we get the chance to video them.
Mhm. Absolutely.
But poor Eliza, she had memories in those two critical reports that are critical uh, articles that you just read. And as you said, there's not much else that you can find about her. You know, you find very few pictures, probably just the playbills and, those types of things. But poor Poe, he didn't have a father who could fill in the information, and
Mhm.
like you said earlier, Eliza's mother and father, they were down in Charleston and they'd pursued their own career.
Mhm.
So they weren't around enough. And, when Poe had been fostered out, he did not have the opportunity to go with his biological grandparents.
Right.
They only
Exactly.
took William. They didn't take all of them. They only took William.
Right. Yeah.
So William
And
maybe had the best opportunity to know who his mother really was, but Edgar
that's
didn't.
true. Or his father because you
Yeah,
know, you know,
because it was his father's biological grandparents. But at the same
correct.
time, I mean, if the grandparents are taking them in, they'd had to have known Eliza and, given
Mhm.
some ideas. Hopefully, they weren't giving him the wrong impressions.
Right. Yeah, I mean, and we'll never know. But
No, no.
one last sentiment on Eliza was that, even though Poe didn't remember his mother,
Mhm.
he did hold her up. I don't want to say on a pedestal, but he, from what he had heard of her or read about her, he held her in, a high place
Yeah, in
within
high
his heart.
esteem. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And in July of 1845 in the Broadway Journal, he wrote this about her. He said the writer of this article is himself the son of an actress, has invariably made it his boast, and no earl was ever prouder of his earldom than he of the descent from a woman who, although well born, hesitated not to consecrate to the drama her brief career of genius and beauty.
Nice.
Yeah,
I mean, that's the biggest compliment he could probably have ever given her,
yeah, absolutely. I
having
mean, it
never known
was,
her.
yeah, I mean, in a way, all those years after she died, that was what, 30 something years after she died, it
Hmm.
was one last review,
Yeah,
of holding her, in high esteem.
yeah, and it was appropriate because
Yeah,
that's what would be remembered. That's how she was being remembered. Just what
yeah,
was being written in the papers about her when she was an actress, and now that was the last thing that was written about her as as she was gone on to the heavenly gates.
exactly. And that's kind of what started the whole psychological trauma for Poe of always wanting that motherly figure in his life.
Yes, and I mean, when you're that young and then you're getting shipped off to someone you don't know. I mean,
Right.
he was 3 years old. He got put into a placement of a foster family of a man and woman that he'd never met, didn't know anything about. And then
Hmm.
they took him under his wing, but they never officially legally adopted Poe.
Right. And to
However,
me, yeah, go ahead. And
yeah,
then I'm going to add a statement. Go ahead.
no, I was going to say, however, he did call them Ma and Pa.
Yeah.
He did
Yes.
regard them as the father and mother figure, more
Hmm.
so with Ma than Pa, because John Allen, he had too much uh, animosity towards. But, he was still going to be a Poe, and that's how he ended up taking the middle name of Allen, is
Right.
in,
Right.
for his foster family.
Yeah. So basically, Edgar didn't have a middle name until that came about. And
Right.
even, and he kind of, in his signatures and such, he never really spelled out Allen very
Mm-mm.
often. It was always E.A. Poe or Edgar A. Poe. And
Yeah.
that kind of makes sense. But
Yeah. He acknowledged it, but he didn't really appreciate it.
yeah, and you know, if it was me in Poe's situation where, his older brother got to go live with his biological grandparents, and then Rosalie, the younger sister, I believe was adopted by the Mackenzies, and
Yes.
he's still just a foster child. To me, it would have been somewhat unsettling, and to almost feel like, are they going to just push me away at any moment? Or, and it would be very unsettling to the point of feeling unwanted. I can
Yeah.
totally see why he and John Allen didn't get along. Plus, they were total opposites of each other.
Mhm. Absolutely. And in some ways, you kind of wonder, why would John Allen step up and take a foster child if he wasn't going to appreciate or want to adopt that child?
Well, and
'Cause-
I think the answer to that question, Jeannie, is because Frances Allen loved to go to the theater,
Mhm.
and she saw Eliza perform on the stage, and then had found out that she died, or Poe's mother died. And
Yep.
it was kind of like, we have no children. Please, let's bring Edgar home to help this family out. And so I think he did it for his wife for that reason. I really think that's the only reason he did it.
And it would make perfect sense because since they weren't able to have any biological children on their own, that he was trying to make her happy, and this was the best of two worlds,
Right.
basically. He
Yeah.
never didn't necessarily have a young baby, but he did have a toddler like that she could take care of and raise, and he wouldn't have to deal so much with on a certain basis.
Right. And to give kind of a little backstory of Frances Allen, um, she was born in Richmond, Virginia, and her like name before she was married, her maiden name was Frances Valentine.
Valentine. Mhm.
And what's very also coincidental is that she was born, Jeannie, drum roll
February
please.
the 14th of 1784. She's
Yes.
190 years before me.
Yes. So you have that in common with her, but and that her maiden name was Valentine and she was born
Mhm.
on Valentine's Day. I mean, how often does that happen?
No, not a lot. I mean, it's very rare that you find that to happen because, well, I mean, more apt that more boys are named Patrick when they're born on St.
St.
Patrick's
Patrick's
Day. So
Day.
that would
Yeah.
be, yeah. So it's very odd to being born having an actual last name and being born on that holiday. So,
Yeah. Very true.
uh, but
But
yeah, Frances Allen was, she was born, well, before Poe's mom. So she was actually older than Eliza,
yeah, just by a
but
few
she was,
years. Just by a few
yeah,
years.
but she was born in Richmond, Virginia.
Hmm.
And go ahead and you can talk more about.
Yeah, well, and she was a Richmond socialite. There's not a whole lot about her that except she enjoyed going to the theater. And then once Edgar was brought into, the family, she did dote on him and everything. But she was considered beautiful. She had a nickname of Fanny, so Fanny Valentine or Fanny Allen once she was married. And then she and John Allen married in 1803. So the same year as the,
Louisiana Purchase.
yes, she had a very good relationship with Edgar. And she died February 28th, 1829. And I know, Jeannie, you found a, something that you wanted to share about her death and how Edgar fit in after her death.
Are you sure it was 1829? Because in some of these it says that she died in 1833.
Oh, interesting. This website that I'm looking at, which is the National Park Service website,
Mhm.
it's got it as February 28th, 1829. That's interesting.
That is interesting. Which that's kind of odd because, well, the information that I'm taking mine from is called "Friends and Enemies: Women in the Life of Edgar Allan Poe" by Richard P. Benton.
From the
That
EA
was,
Poe org site. Yeah.
yeah, it's from a publication in 1987.
Okay.
So, but it kind of meshes in there, I guess, because one
Yeah.
says that she died in 1833, but in one of the things that I was going to point out is that on December the 1st in 1828, Poe had expressed an anxiety about her feelings toward him.
Mm-hmm.
Like he wrote and said, "My dearest love to Ma, it is only when absent that we can tell the value of such a friend. I hope she will not let my wayward disposition wear away the love she used to have for me." And that seems to be a remark about where he's become, wayward. He's, left home. He and Alan have had a you know throwback about uh some things about him not finishing college and all that. And then after that is when he became the cadet at West Point and incurred John Allen's displeasure. That's when John Allen basically told him he wished to have no further, communication
Right.
with Poe.
Yeah, because it was after Francis's death that he,
Yes, because
yeah.
it was after he wrote this. He wrote a letter on January the 3rd, 1831, referring to the death of Francis Allen. So that's what I'm kind of figuring is like, okay, well, he's got it wrong up here at 1833, but this down here has it correct.
Mm-hmm.
He wrote a letter saying, I came home, you will remember, the night of the burial. If she had not died while I was away, there would have been nothing to regret. Your love I never valued, but she, I believed, loved me as her own child. And in essence, he was her only child. She never
Yeah.
did give birth and never had any children on her own with Alan, correctly, because she died before she gave birth.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah. And so it just seems that poor Frances was the the childless woman, the one that was unable to give birth to have her own child, but she
Mm-hmm.
was given Edgar.
Yeah.
She thought, she took Edgar and she loved him like her own son. And even Edgar
Mm-hmm.
in his letters says that he
Yeah.
believed with his whole heart that she was that she loved him like her own son.
Yeah.
So, and
Absolutely.
then once more he got estranged from a mother figure and was not able to be there in her final days.
Yeah.
So that's just
I,
sad.
I think Edgar really wished he could have been there before she died, to talk
Yeah,
to her and to have that closure with her. Because just another thing I read, that he did like get there the day after, she
her
died.
funeral.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and from what I'm looking at with some other websites, 1829 is correct.
Yeah, I just don't understand why he wrote 1833, but then he has 1829 in the correct and
Yeah.
the things. Could have just been a mistype. You never
Yeah,
know.
absolutely. Yeah, because
Because dates are very hard when you're typing them in to keep straight on
ab,
what goes
ab,
where.
absolutely, because the other information in that article is definitely like correct date wise. So,
Yes, because the actual readings he is actually quoting from Ostrom. And I believe Ostrom, I can't think of the name of what he wrote, but let me see if I
mhm,
can find it. But he's the one that had written about what was written in those letters
mhm,
that Poe had left behind.
yeah,
And so I think that's where the dates were coming from that. Yeah, it's from the collected letters of Edgar Allan Poe by
yeah,
Ostrom, Pollen, and Savoy. Um, that Ostrom was a professor of English at Wittenberg College in Springville, Ohio. So
okay, okay,
yeah, so it's like I said, it's very easy to do when you're writing to misplace things. But anyway, moving on, we do have the correct dates now. She died in 1829.
yes,
And then Poe came home, he wrote that bitter letter in 1831, which I
mhm,
think was an indication of why he left West Point in March 1831 because he was going to fail out anyway.
right, right, and
And
he headed back to Baltimore at this point.
yeah, because he was seeking refuge because he knows that Francis is gone, so he does not have her that he can go to. So he
Right,
goes to the next person that's left that he can seek out, and that would be his aunt, Miss Maria Clem.
mhm,
She was a widow. She had 13-year-old son Henry and 9-year-old daughter Virginia, but she
yes,
was also taking care of Poe's grandmother, Elizabeth Poe, and his
and
brother, William Henry.
exactly. Yes. They were all living together and living on the government pension that
Mhm.
Elizabeth Poe's grandmother was receiving.
Yes. So Miss Clem, or Muddy,
Yeah,
as
her
she was
nickname.
known, her nickname of Muddy, she was the
Mhm.
caregiver. And so she was, raising the household of everybody in it and
Right.
taking care of everyone. Yeah. Off of just the pension of the grandmother. So he shows up and he's like, I'm here. And it's like, you can imagine he's like, well, thinking to himself, I've gotten kicked out of West Point. Francis is dead. Alan is a pain. I don't, never want to speak to him again. So, so why, he's wanting to seek out someone that could love him. And that's one thing Edgar always wanted to do. He was always seeking for people to love him and care for him and not throw him away like trash.
Right.
Another interesting thing that not with Clem, but his older brother William became an alcoholic and had been to sea and experimented with a writer himself, but he himself died August the 1st of 1831. So he didn't live very much longer after Poe showed up at the Clem household.
No, not at all.
So he barely had that much time with his actual, sibling. Now he did get an honorable discharge from the U.S. Army in April 1829.
Right, because he found somebody to take his place.
Yes. Um, so that was one good thing. It was his West Point Academy days that was not very good.
Hmm.
So Muddy was both. This is what's really strange. Muddy was the mother figure that not only took him in, cared for him, loved him at his lowest, but I think even Edgar made a comment saying that she was the mother of his soul
Yeah,
because she gave him Virginia,
yeah, exactly.
which is kind of weird in itself, but okay.
Right. Well, and also too, just to give like dates,
Mhm.
she was born March 17th, 1790, so St. Patrick's Day, and she died February 16th, 1871, which we knew she lived a lot longer than Poe and Virginia.
Are we talking about Muddy?
Yeah,
Muddy was born on St. Patrick's Day?
yes.
Oh my goodness. Francis was born Valentine's Day. Muddy was born on St. Patrick's Day. This is kind
Yes.
of freaky.
Yeah, it's kind of cool.
Well, hey, my brother was born on St. Patrick's Day. So,
Oh,
that's
that's
another thing that's really odd.
yeah, that is weird.
Everybody always asks my mom, says, did you do that on purpose so you wouldn't have to forget their birthdays? And she's like, nope. Like it just happened that way. So,
Oh,
but I mean, Muddy in essence was to me like his last true chance of having a true mother bond
yeah.
because even the relationship with his grandmother wasn't very close because she was paralyzed, she was bedridden, and she was his dad's mom. So you can probably see that he may not wanted to have anything much to do with her or her to him.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and all Muddy had time for was just to take care of the household, take care of Mrs. Poe.
Right.
It says that that was Maria's mother too, because
Right.
and she died in seven. It says here that she had been confined to bed for at least 8 years of her life.
Yeah, because she was paralyzed and
Had other
which,
complaints, so
yeah.
yeah.
And so even though Poe did live with them while she was still alive for part of the time, he really didn't, because of her invalidism,
Yeah.
he really did not have a relationship with her like he might have before she became ill, like what Henry would have had with her.
And plus, maybe she didn't want to have a relationship with Edgar. That's why they only took William
Yeah, it's
to
hard to
begin with.
say. I mean, I could see why they would take the older brother because of, you know, almost I almost want to say like, thinking of primogeniture, the oldest son kind of thing. And I mean, that may have nothing to do with it, but that to me would make sense why they would take the oldest child.
Well, and it could also be because there was only 2 years difference in their age, and
Right.
they had to be, they had to be elder. So, you and I have seen it, how grandparents having to take care of young kids
Mm-hmm.
would be a huge, huge issue, and especially in that day and age. So
Yeah.
most people were having lots of kids, and then they were trying to figure out how to get them in apprenticeships so that they wouldn't have to take them, have to take care of them anymore.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well,
But
what else do we know, Jeannie, about Maria Clem?
not much. I mean, she was, she took care of Edgar and Virginia, and she was there for their wedding, and you know, she outlived all of her kids and even Edgar.
Yeah.
So she was a very stout woman who take care of all of that family, but then be the last one standing. So
Mm-hmm.
it really didn't say much, about Muddy and what she had to go through, other
Yeah.
than just being a caretaker to everybody.
Yeah. I mean, I think so. And she basically was kind of left destitute with no source of income after Poe
Mm-hmm.
died. And so she basically lived off of friends and people that wanted to help her, off of, like donations and things from them. And one thing
Mm-hmm.
I found that was very interesting is that there were some small sums sent to her by Longfellow and Dickens.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that I could see how she could have continued to live on, even though she would pretty much be destitute without having any other income, since she
Yeah.
was living off of her mother's pension. And then after Poe died, and she had no other way. But back in, those days, and even in the early 20th century, a
Mhm.
lot of women, even women that had children, would be live-ins in households and take care
Mhm.
of their children and their household and all that kind of stuff. So she could probably, have made a living just doing like laundry for people or
Yeah. Mhm.
stuff like that, not just living off of charitable donations. And I could see her doing something like that just to, continue to live.
Oh, absolutely. And I think just from the one article that we both read that
Mm-hmm.
had a lot of really good information from the eapo.org site. I
Yep.
found another one that like is just kind of a little bit more of just her, is that some scholars believe that, or question, was she really a good influence on Poe? Because I think that one of the things I read that sometimes she would give Poe a hard time about some things, but he always spoke highly of her, thought of her as a mother, and she treated him like a son. And so I think that if he did speak of her in, to someone any kind of way, if she was interfering or trying to
Mm-hmm.
boss him around or anything like that, it all was out of the devotion of trying to make sure he was making good decisions and doing what was best for their family. I can't imagine her being, anything other than that. You know what I mean?
So, I mean, and that's the thing with a woman like Muddy and what she was having to do and raising the household and taking care of the household. I can very much see her just taking Edgar as another son, since she was already a mother of two,
Right.
and wanting him, because you have to think, I mean, she apparently was had blessed the union between Edgar and Virginia.
Mhm.
So she already saw him as a son in that aspect of it. And then she wanted to make sure that, Edgar could be successful because
Mm-hmm.
I hate to say it, she probably was a little bit selfish because she knew that was basically her money train or her
Right.
her
Yeah.
security. So there was two things there. She wanted to make sure that morally and ethically he was a very good gentleman.
Yeah.
And then on the same side, she was being a little selfish, just wanted to make sure that he could take care of her and
Right.
Virginia.
Yeah. And honestly, from the with how they lived sometimes, where it was a little money here, a little money there from,
Mm-hmm.
Poe working in different magazines and things and,
Mm-hmm.
selling, some of his publications, for very small amounts of money.
Right.
She kind of had to be that way.
Oh yeah. I mean, that's the thing. It was a survive or die in
Right.
that
It
day and age.
it
And
was not malicious towards Poe. It was
no,
trying to make sure to basically being a parent and guiding a child.
yes. I mean, she was not in anything that I've read or anything that's been talked about, especially with Edgar when he would talk about her, as anything about an abusive type relationship
Oh
or even a
no, no.
degrading type
Yeah.
relationship. It was always and very much on par with the societal norms of those days,
Mhm.
having that type of female in your life.
Yeah.
And Muddy, out of all of, I mean, when I think of Liza and I think of Frances, I think of the dainty flowers. Not
Yes.
that they're not strong, but just that they can be easily trampled and taken out.
Yeah.
Whereas when I think of Muddy, I think of her as like a, a robust rose bush, to
Yeah.
where she's beautiful, but she's stout, she's got thorns, and she's a survivor.
Yes. Yeah.
No matter what comes in her way, and she's not afraid of encroaching upon anybody else to get what she needs and what
Right.
required to take care of the people that she loved.
Mhm.
And so,
Absolutely.
and I think that's the epitome of the most important and longest relationship that Edgar had of a mother figure. And it was very much a prominent and needed one, I
Yeah.
think, for his sake.
Oh, absolutely.
That's why I said at the very beginning, he had the mother, that gave him life, that he barely, knew for almost 3 years,
Mhm.
that probably never had another memory, couldn't remember her, had no one to remind him of her. Now, Frances may have reminded him about how wonderful an actress she was,
Mhm.
but he really didn't have anybody to tell him about what type of mother she was.
Right.
Then
Exactly.
him having Frances, who was a stout supporter for him, who encouraged his art, who encouraged his poetry, encouraged him to write, and then all of a sudden he was torn away from her by a jealous, if you would say, we could probably call him a jealous, or just a, what kind of overbearing, I think would be a good word for
Yeah.
John.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's probably a good word.
Yeah, he was separated by an overbearing and controlling person, and so he lost once again uh, the mother figure of someone who loved him like a son,
Yeah.
and the only mother that he had known in his life up to that point.
Absolutely. And when you think about when he came to live with them, he was what, around 21?
Who, Muddy or Francis?
No, when Poe came to live with Muddy, he was around 21, I believe.
Yeah, yeah, because
So,
out of he was just out of West Point, which was 31.
mhm.
So yeah, he was about 21, 22 when he came to live with Muddy.
Yeah, and so half of his life was spent with her influence,
Yes.
with like, intended influence because he lived with her,
Right.
before and after, he married Virginia.
Yes, he had a mother in Francis who was there for his formative years,
Yes.
who was a stable, individual that was giving him the love and support that he needed.
Mm-hmm.
And then when he came to Muddy, he was in his, they were still types of formative years, but they were in his pre-adult and adult years.
Yeah. Leading into, yeah, his
Yeah,
adult. Yeah.
because science says that we are all still developing our personals, our personalities, and all that kind of stuff by the age of 25. It's when we
Absolutely.
firstly get it in there. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's still in some type of developmental age when he came to live with Muddy. And
Yeah.
so he took over where Francis had left off and continued on until he died. So
Exactly. And
so poor Poe had three main women mothers in his life.
yeah. And I think it's just so sad that, Muddy did not even get to attend his funeral.
I know. I mean, that's heartbreaking. And it kind of, I hate to say it, but it's kind of ironic since Poe wasn't able to go to Francis's funeral,
Hmm.
and then Muddy's not able to attend his. So
Exactly. Yeah.
it's
It's
kind of
just very, yeah, it's, I can't even think of the right word for it.
it's sad,
Yeah. It's
but
tragic.
it's tragic. Yes, it's the tip. It's the major Greek tragedy. I hate to say it, it is, and it's
Yeah. I was going to
Poe
bring
is
in
a Greek
Shakespeare,
tragedy.
but yeah, yeah, it's a Greek
Yeah,
tragedy. It is.
yeah.
And
So,
it just,
but at
it's so
least at the
sad.
end, he had somebody.
Yeah.
He had he had the mother figures in his life. Some of them were more important than others. Some of them were just fleeting, because
Right.
there are a few that we're not discussing, but
Hmm.
they weren't as prominent, in my opinion, for his development.
Yeah. And I think he was always looking for a mother figure in every, not every female relationship he had, but
Mm-hmm.
in many, because it's not necessarily like mother to child. It's just that feeling of being mothered and cared for to the point of unconditional love.
Yeah, and I mean, if we could get if we really wanted to get in the psychological aspect of it, with Edgar choosing the women that he did,
Hmm.
you can see that the influence of the current mother figure at the time was an influence on the women,
Yeah.
because it is thought, we'll go back to Greek with the Oedipus complex.
Hmm.
You'll fall in love with the mother.
Yeah.
So, the what was her name? Sarah?
Sarah
Was
Helen
that
Whitman. Is that what you're talking about? Oh no,
no?
you're
I'm talking
talking
about
about,
his very first one.
oh
The
yes,
one,
his friend, the mother was Jane Stith Stannard,
right?
and her son and Edgar were friends.
Right. But I was talking about the one that the woman that he was going to marry, but the father could not
Oh,
stand it. So she ended up
that was
marrying somebody else.
Elmira. That was Elmira
Elmira.
Royster.
Yes.
Yes. That was his
So
first love, like, for,
exactly.
yes.
That's what I was talking about. But if you
Yeah.
look at Elmira, you can take some of the same characteristics and apply for Elmira to Francis.
Mhm.
And then if you look at it with Virginia, was Poe truly in love with Virginia, or was he in love with Muddy? And the only way that he could get Muddy would be through Virginia. Because remember, he called her the mother of his soul.
Yeah.
So, and I mean, this is just spitballing because of psychological aspects of it with the Oedipus complex and all those kinds of things. You could
Mhm.
probably identify some of the reasons that Poe chose some of the women that he did, because they were a lot like some of the influential women of his life.
Yeah.
And that's all I'm saying about that. I'm just saying that,
Yeah, yeah. I don't want. I
yeah,
think we should like turn around the digression and back to away from the Freudian psychological as I'm
hey,
making
you can't
circles
talk
back around
Poe.
with my hands that no one can see.
Exactly. You can't talk Poe without talking psychology is all I got to
True.
say. But in
Yes.
the end of it, he did have very prominent female mother figures.
Yes, he did. And just that, Gina, you just made me think of putting,
Mhm.
you can't have poetry without Poe. So you
Exactly.
can't have psychology.
Hmm.
Ah,
Without Poe,
yes.
you can't get psychotic. There we go.
Oh, Lord. Yeah. All
You
right.
started.
On that note,
Yes, we wanted
we,
to thank everyone for the episode listening today because we wanted to pay homage to all the mothers out there for
yes,
Mother's Day. And even though it's just, call it a day, but mothers should be celebrated always.
absolutely. And, you could kind of say Mother's Day is every day, just, and Father's
Hmm.
Day is every day because you should always honor your mother. And whether she's still here with you or
Hmm.
she is on another plane somewhere else in heaven. And, even, if you're a dog mom, cat mom,
Exactly.
bonus mom, any kind of mom, if you are a mother figure in someone's life, or, someone is that to you, they're not related by blood, honor these women because it's very important.
Yeah, just like we discussed with Poe, it's whether she may be the life giver, she may be the love giver, or she may be the savior of your soul.
Yeah.
After you've lost everything, you need to just remember that there are people in this life that are there for a reason.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And so we are very, very happy you joined us, and we hope you enjoyed our little trip down Poe's motherly lane.
Yes. Oh, I like that, Jeannie.
Yeah, that can be the title of the episode, Trip Down Motherly Lane.
That's very true. Well, I
Hmm.
think at this point, Jeannie,
We
we
are
are
Poe.
out.
Because I feel that in the heavens above, the angels, whispering to one another, can find among their burning terms of love none so devotional as that of mother.